2025. It's 2025. And I thought I would give you my list of the 25 books that I want to make sure that I read in 2025. Okay, so I thought it might be fun to just start with this little jar here. Now, this jar was the books that I wanted to make sure I read last year. There aren't 24 in here because I started this halfway through the year. It was even longer than halfway through the year. But I do think I read most of the books that were in here. So I'm going to pull them out one by one, and I will tell you if I read them or not. So let's go here. So first up, I have The Lost Man by Jane Harper. That one I didn't read yet. See how maybe I didn't do as good as I thought I did. Exiles by Jane Harper. That one I did read, and that one was in the trilogy that was my #1 book of last year. Let's see, what else do I got here? I got A Corruption of Blood. That was by Ambrose. That was the 3rd book in the Raven and Fisher series, and I did read that. Gave that one 5 stars. Loved that one. This one is The Pale Horseman by Bernard Cornwell. I read that. Really enjoyed that one. I gave that the first 2 books in that series that I read last year. I gave those ones 5 stars, and they made my top. I had a good idea of what books I was going to like when I put them in this jar. I Am a Cat. That is by, I've got it right here, by Soseki. It is a Japanese classic, and I haven't read that one yet. And finally, I had We'll Prescribe You a Cat, which is another one that I haven't read yet. So I actually did 50-50. I had 6 books in the jar. I read 3 and I didn't read 3. So we will see where that gets us because those 3 are actually on my 25 in 2025. So I will make a new jar full and put these new books in it. So I thought it'd be fun to just go through the list. I've got a stack here of the ones that I own, and then I have a list of some library-related ones that I'll have to get from the library. So I'll just kind of go back and forth between the 2 stacks. This isn't a stack, it's a piece of paper. Between the stack and the piece of paper. And tell you what books I am planning to make sure that I read this year. So let's just start on the top of the stack. This is Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. It is the 2nd book in the Farseer trilogy, which is the first of her Realm of the Elderlings books. This continues Fitz's story. Fitz is a young man in this one. He was a boy at the very first one. He's a young man in this one who is trained to be the king's assassin. And this one just continues his story, and we'll get more of the political intrigue and everything that was going on in the first book. So I'm excited about that one. From my list here, I have The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This one follows a group of older people who live in a retirement village. They're retired there, and they meet weekly to investigate old murders as part of their murder club. But one day a dead body appears pretty much on their doorstep, and they get to actually look into a live case. So that one sounds like it'll be quite fun. It's the first in a series. Next up, I have the one that I mentioned from my jar, We'll Prescribe You a Cat by Seo Ishida. This one I have been really looking forward to reading ever since I bought it in September, and I have it on my list for one of the challenges that I'm going to do this year. It is set in Kyoto in Japan, and it offers there's a clinic for the soul there, where people who are struggling, they happen to come across this clinic. And at the clinic, instead of prescribing you medication, they prescribe you a cat for a certain period of time. And once the person takes the cat home, their life changes. So, of course, that sounds like it's right up my alley. And I've been enjoying these Japanese translation books, the healing fiction. So I am really looking forward to reading this one this year. Next on my list, I have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I have been wanting to try something by Becky Chambers because I'm going to be trying some science fiction this year. It's a genre that I haven't read much of, but I wanted to try Becky Chambers because I've heard good things about her. In this one, a woman joins a crew of an aging spaceship to explore the galaxy and then it follows their path as they are headed towards this planet. And it has found family, cozy vibes, so it sounds like it'll be a really good one. Next up on the stack, I have Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto. I have been wanting to read this book ever since I heard about it. It looks like it would be right up my alley, kind of a cozy mystery. This one follows Vera Wong, who's a lonely little old lady who lives above her tea shop. And one day she comes downstairs and discovers a dead body in the tea shop. She thinks that the police aren't doing what they should be doing, so she decides she's going to solve the murder. But she thinks that the murderer would have returned to the scene of the crime, so she thinks that somebody in the coffee shop, somebody who's one of her clients, did it. So it sounds like it's going to be funny and heartwarming and enjoyable. Next on my list is The Appeal by Janice Hallett. This is a mixed media one. I read one of her books last year, The Mysterious Case of the Elperton Angels, and really enjoyed it. I love the way she writes it, where it's all letters and emails and text messages and transcripts and those types of things, and then you have to try and figure out the story from it and put it together and solve the mystery. So I'm really looking forward to trying another one of hers, and The Appeal was the one that I picked because it, I believe, was her first one. And it is about a local theater group. They're doing a play to raise money for the director's sick grandchild. And then throughout the course of the intrigues that are going on with the play, a dead body is found. So that one sounds interesting. This was my gift book to myself for finishing my TBR game in December, for finishing the board. And I am really looking forward to this one. This is probably top on my list of ones that I really, really want to read right now. And that is The Full Moon Coffee Shop by Mei Mochizuki. This one is another Japanese healing fiction. It is about a little coffee shop that appears and moves around the city. And it is run by talking cats. People go into this coffee shop. They are having issues. The cats tell them their fortune, give them ideas of how they can help themselves. So again, right up my alley with the cats. So I'm really looking forward to this one. This one, like I say, is probably one of the top priorities on this list for me. So on the paper here, we have Starter Villain by John Scalzi. Now, I had wanted to read something by John Scalzi for quite a while. He sounds like he's a really fun author. And as you all know, I kind of like reading humorous mysteries and thrillers and that sort of book. I picked this one because of the cats involved in it again. Cats, big surprise, right? I do also want to read the Kaiju Protection Society as well. We have that book that my sister got for Christmas. So I do want to read that one this year as well. But I picked Starter Villain because I've been looking at it for a couple years now. And it's about this guy who inherits his uncle's supervillain business. But it involves spy cats. So that's really all I needed to know. And yeah. Another one is The Lost Man by Jane Harper. This was another one that was in my jar there for last year that I didn't get to. Jane Harper is the author of the Aaron Falk trilogy, which, if you will have watched my video, it made my best book of the year, was The Dry by Jane Harper. So I'm really looking forward to reading this one. I have heard from some reviews I read online that this is actually, they think this is her best one, which would be big shoes to fill because I absolutely loved The Dry and then that whole trilogy. So this one follows a pair of brothers in Australia. They meet for the first time in months at the remote fence line separating their cattle ranches, and their third brother is dead. So given the remote location and the limited number of people who are around in that area, the chances are that it is somebody they know or one of them who committed the murder, and that is the general premise of the book. So then I have Toward Eternity by Anton Hur. This one is written by Anton Her, who is one of my favorite translators. He translates books from Korean, and he translated the BTS book, which of course I loved. He also translated Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung, which I really enjoyed. He translated Blood of the Lost Kings by Sung-Il Kim, which made it to my honorable mentions last year. And I really enjoy his translations. So he actually last year wrote a book himself, and it is called Toward Eternity. It's a science fiction. There's a new technology that eradicates cancer by replacing cells with robot or android cells. And then that renders the people who receive it pretty much immortal or invincible. And then there's also a researcher who teaches an AI to understand poetry and think, and then that connects into it as well. And it just sounds like a very interesting book. And like I said, I love his translations, so I would like to try out his writing. Next is the last one that was on my list for last year that I didn't get to, and that is I Am a Cat by Soseki Natsumi. This is 3 volumes of, it's classic Japanese literature from the turn of the century of the last century, the 1900s. It's told from the point of view of a cat. It's an abandoned, unwanted kitten who observes the world around them and observes life and everything going on. It looks like it deals with human nature and biting commentary on the social upheaval of the era and that sort of thing. So it is another one that I found at a used bookstore and I thought looked interesting. So I want to definitely read that one. Next on the list, I have The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. Now, this is a fantasy, it's a murder mystery set in a fantasy world, which I, of course, love murder mysteries, so I think I will enjoy this. So the general plot is that this Imperial officer is found dead with a tree spontaneously bursting out of him. So this eccentric, brilliant investigator named Anna Dolabra is called in to investigate. And the story is told from the point of view of her assistant, Din, who is a character who had been modified to have a perfect memory. So it sounds like he's an interesting character, and it just looks like a really good story. Then I have this beast. This is Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. I probably pronounced that terribly. I'm not good with Spanish. Miguel de Cervantes. Cervantes? Cervantes. Blah. We'll hope I sounded. We'll hope I said that somewhat correctly. Anyway, this is a classic, obviously. Don Quixote is about the man who believes that he is a knight. He goes out with his mighty steed that is a half-dead horse. And his friend Sancho, who rides a donkey. And they make their way across 16th century Spain, and he fights windmills thinking he's a knight fighting enemies and giants. So I've been wanting to read this one for a long time, and I've heard that it is quite funny and that the humor translated well and remains humorous even today. So I would also like to read James by Percival Everett. This one has been going around on BookTube and everything because it was nominated for the Goodreads Choice Award. And I just think it sounds really interesting. It is a retelling of the Huckleberry Finn story, the American classic, but it's told from the point of view of Jim or James the slave. And I'm very curious. I remember reading Huckleberry Finn back in back in elementary school, I think. Elementary or high school anyways. And I am very interested to read a take on it from Jim's point of view. So very likely what I'm going to do with that one is I want to actually reread Huckleberry Finn and then read James just as a separate vlog, just for interest's sake, to compare the two. Here I have Voices of the Dead by Ambrose Perry. This is the 4th book in the Raven and Fisher mystery series that I've been reading this last year. And I'm loving this series. I am really enjoying it. It made my top books of last year as well, this series. And this is the 4th one. It, again, follows Dr. Will Raven and Sarah Fisher, who is a young woman who would love to be a doctor, but they live in Victorian Edinburgh, when that wasn't allowed for women. So she makes a very, very interesting character. In this one, there's body parts have been found at Surgeon's Hall, and they're not anatomy specimens. So Will Raven is involved in trying to figure out what's going on there. And then also you see Sarah continuing her path towards trying to find a way to follow her ambitions in a world that is not designed for women to be ambitious. So I'm looking forward to continuing that series. Then on my list here, I have Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Again, this is one, it's a science fiction again, and I want to get into reading some science fiction. And I've heard that this one is a really good one, especially if you like thrillers, which I do. So I thought that would be a good transition into science fiction. So in that one, there's a man, he's a physics professor. And one day he's on his way home to his wife and son, and he gets knocked out. And when he wakes up, he's in essentially an alternate reality where his wife isn't his wife and his son has never been born. And all of a sudden he's a genius physicist who has come up with some sort of important invention that is changing the world. And so you don't know what's real. Is that reality, or is his other life reality? And he's trying to get back to his other life with his wife and his son who he loves. And so it sounds like a very good book. I'm looking forward to that one. The Lords of the North by Bernard Cornwell. This is the third book in the Uhtred of Bebbanburg saga that I've been reading this last year. The first two books made my top of the, books of the year last year. And I'm really excited to continue this series. It is set in the Viking era in England when the Danish Vikings had invaded England and were fighting to take over. Uhtred starts as a boy in the first book and is continuing on into as a young man, and his destiny is entwined with King Alfred of Wessex, who's the king of the last kingdom that was standing against the Danes, but he was also raised by the Danes, so he has connections there. And I believe in this one, I'm really looking forward to this one because I believe in this one is when Uhtred and his friend Ragnar go back to Northumbria to try and figure out what happened in this major event that happened in the first book, and get some revenge. So I'm really excited about reading this one. Then I also would like to continue on with the Veronica Speedwell series by Deanna Rayborn. So the next one is A Perilous Undertaking. This is book 2 of Veronica Speedwell. And in this one, Veronica is asked by a mysterious lady to save a man from the execution for murder. And so she decides to try and solve the mystery with, of course, the assistance of her friend Stoker, and the two of them go on to try and solve this mystery. So I'm really looking forward to continuing that series as well. Next up, I have Wings of the Storm by Giles Christian. Now, this one is the third and final book. Hi, Raven. My little friend again. This one is the third and final book in the trilogy, the Rise of Sigurd trilogy by Giles Christian. I reread the first book last year, and I finally read the second book, which, if you know me, you know that continuing on with trilogies is something that I really struggle with sometimes. But so this year I do want to finish this trilogy finally. I have had it for years and just haven't done it. So it follows a young man named Sigurd. He is the son of a Jarl, and his family gets murdered in the first book. And he heads out to try and gather fighters to him to take his revenge. And this is the final installment where he should hopefully get the revenge. So I'm looking forward to that. Next on here is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. Now, I know everybody should be absolutely shocked. I have a romance on my 25 for 2025. But last year I really, really enjoyed Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. And this is the sequel to that. I do want to try reading this trilogy and just see what I think of it. This one follows Bree, who is one of the friends from book one. Hi. Yes, I know. I love you too. One of the friends from book one. And a new doctor comes to the hospital where she works as a doctor, and they don't get along, but then they start exchanging letters, and this leads to other things. Next up, I've got a lot of sequels on this list, as you can see. I have Scarlet by Stephen Lawhead. This is book 2 in the King Raven series, which is his series that takes the Robin Hood tale and transplants it into Wales. And the first book follows a young man named Bram. He is the son of a Welsh king, and his father's kingdom gets taken over by the Normans, and then he heads out into the forest, escapes into the forest, and finds the rebels, and they're working to try and recover the kingdom and essentially take the snot out of the Normans. So the first one was really, really enjoyable, and so I'm looking forward to reading the second one. And I also have the third one as well. I got those for Christmas, so I'd like to actually read both of those this year, but I put the second one on the list. I also have Moon of the Turning Leaves by Waubgeshig Rice. Now, I read the first one in this series last year. It was called Moon of the Crusted Snow, and I really enjoyed it. It's a post-apocalyptic novel, which is not normally my thing, but I really enjoyed that one. It follows a group of Anishinaabe people who are on a reserve in the north when everything shuts down, the power and everything shuts down. And they have to try and figure out how to survive and deal with people coming into their community from the outside and all those sorts of interesting things. Now, this one takes place 12 years later, and the small group of them who have been living off the land have decided that they need to look for another place to live because resources are getting scarce. So a search party heads out to look for a new home, and it is led by Evan Whitesky, who was the main character in the first book. So I'm really interested to see where he goes with that series. I'm not sure if it's going to be a trilogy, a duology, or whatever, but the second book did come out last year. Another sequel, Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson. I read Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone last year and really, really enjoyed it. It made my list of best books of last year. And this is the sequel, and then he does have a third one, which is I think a novella, a Christmas novella. But this one follows our hero, Ernie Cunningham, again. And he has gone to the Australian Mystery Writers Society, and it's a crime writing festival aboard a famous train that travels through the Australian desert. So you have all these crime writers on there, and then somebody turns up dead. So it's kind of a locked room mystery as well. And I loved the writing style that Benjamin Stevenson used for the first book, so I'm really looking forward to reading a second one. Oh, careful, stack. The last one on this list, I want to read The Sanatorium by Sarah Pierce. I actually, my sister has the whole trilogy, and so I want to read the whole trilogy eventually, but The Sanatorium is the first one. It follows Detective Ellen Warner, and she goes to a former sanatorium in the wintertime it's been turned into a resort, and she goes there to meet her estranged brother and his fiancée to celebrate their engagement. But while they're there, a snowstorm hits, and so they're trapped, and then the fiancé goes missing. So she has to try and figure out what happened and what's going on. So I'm really excited to read that one. I've heard that her writing is really good. And then finally, number 25, I want to read The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is the first book in his Bloodsworn trilogy. And I'm really looking forward to checking this out because it's Norse inspired. I've heard John Gwynne's writing is really good. And I've never read anything of his before, and I thought, why not start with the Norse-inspired one? Because as everybody knows, I love Norse mythology and things that are inspired by Viking era stuff. So this one looks really good. It follows 3 warriors, a huntress on a perilous quest, a noblewoman pursuing battle fame, and a thrall seeking retribution among the mercenaries known as the Bloodsworn. And it looks like it's a really good book. I actually read the first 10 pages for a thing that I was doing and really enjoyed the writing. So I'm looking forward to this one. And I got this one for Christmas, and I'll have to pick up the other 2 in the series. So that is my 25 for 2025 that I am going to put into my jar and hopefully read throughout the year. I do sometimes pull things out of this jar for my TBR game, and other times I have the list so that I can prioritize picking these books. And I may do a vlog or 2 during the year where I pick books from that jar. So let me know down in the comments what your most anticipated book for reading this year is, whether it comes out in 2025 or if it's a previous book. And let me know down in the comments what you're really looking forward to reading. And if you've read any of these, what did you think of them? So I will see you guys soon on my next video. Don't forget to give me a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you soon. Bye.